Welcome back to Tech of a Tea. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson, and today it is episode 51. And today's guest he's made a video that it's one of those videos where, like, 5 years from now, it'll pop up in the YouTube recommendations and suddenly get, like, 10 million views. But as of right now, no one's seen it. It's called was the exact title? I watched JoJo 50 times to learn Japanese. Is that exactly what it was? Or am I slightly off there?
Oh yeah, it was a I watched an episode of JoJo 50 times to learn Japanese, basically.
I have no idea how only 2,000 people have seen that. It
Well,
does not make any sense to me.
I'm actually pretty glad that even 2,000 people have seen it, because so far most other videos have done way worse than that one. So
Yeah, that's fair. Let's see. What have your other videos done? So, your best performing one was your best performing one was your first video. Okay, it's a weird way to
yeah,
go.
but that I'm all right with that, because that video took me like over 100 hours to make. Probably it was like 30 minutes long.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Yeah, I've noticed that you put a lot of production value in your videos.
Yeah, it's like when I make like this isn't actually my first YouTube channel. I've been making videos since 2009,
Hmm.
and I've always liked making videos which have nice editing and like nice pacing and stuff like that, because I basically got into making videos through video editing. Like,
Hmm.
I just liked video editing, and that's why whenever I have made YouTube videos, I also want them to be like nicely edited, almost for the sake of just editing. Even if it doesn't really provide like any substance to the video, it's just a bit more enjoyable to watch. So I enjoy it myself. So that's why I make them more. That's why I put more focus on like editing and um, synergy with audio and
Hmm.
things like that.
Well, before we get too far into stuff like that, give people a quick rundown of what you're doing now. I'll show you your channel on the screen. There we go.
All right. So basically, I just finished making a video which is my experience with Duolingo, essentially,
I caught that one
and
a bit earlier
how
today.
I.
That was a pretty good video.
Oh, nice. Well, basically, I'm learning Japanese now. I used to learn Russian a bit, but I started learning Japanese, and I actually got pretty interested in like just language learning in general.
Hmm.
So I started formulating a lot of thoughts about it, and I decided that I could make even for myself. Like, the first video I made was a video for myself to some extent, like just to keep a diary of my Japanese learning experience.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I thought, like, I have a lot of other thoughts too, which I could share with people. So I decided that that for now I'm going to like just make videos about some random thoughts I want to share. And just so far they have all been about language learning, but in the future I will probably make some other videos as well.
Hmm.
But basically, you could call my channel right now a language learning channel, mostly focusing on Japanese, but it's not limited to that in the future for sure.
Yeah, I think while you still have a fairly small channel, it's a good time to start experimenting with other sort of content, because once you have an established audience, that's when it becomes kind of difficult to actually, I guess, try new things out without the video basically completely bombing. At the size you're at now, if a video does well, that's actually surprising, but once there's an audience there, it's a bit harder to break out of a niche.
Yeah, sure. It's like a lot of people get upset if you like break free from a established video format that you've built an audience on.
Hmm.
Like especially like gaming channels, which like play only one game, and then when they change the game, a lot of people get really upset about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of streamers who've definitely had that problem. Like when I know of a couple of GTA streamers who decided I've played GTA 5 for 4,000 hours. I'm kind of bored of it now. And then they try
Oh yeah,
something else and nobody watches it.
yeah. It's kind of like the sad side of streaming, I suppose, that when you get burnt out from a game and you want to try something else, it will most likely, at first at least, underperform in terms of views, and your audience will probably not like it as much. And I suppose it's especially for some specific games, like when you have a fan base which does not like a specific game, such as I know a lot of streamers who like to stream League of Legends
Hmm.
sometimes, and every time they do so, like a lot of people get really upset about it because like they hate the game.
Hmm. That's not a game I've ever felt any desire to play. I don't know why you'd want to play something like League. Everything I hear about it, like anyone who's super into it, doesn't make the game sound fun. It just makes it sound like suffering, basically.
Yeah, it's basically I've actually played it quite a lot. I like it because it's like stimulating. It's just like it's a fun competitive game. Like
Mhm.
it's fun to. It's like satisfying to some extent to like to play it. Like when you improve and get better and so on, and outplay your enemies and so on. But at the same time, I'm kind of avoiding playing it as well right now because it's just it's like when you play a game of ranked, it has the potential to completely ruin your day, basically. And I kind of don't want to like spend time on that and end up losing something, like
Mm.
having my mood ruined by a ranked game or whatever. Because even if like even if you have a good mentality and all that, it's still if like something really bad happens in the game, like some teammate going AFK or feeding, it's like it still kind of sucks, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I used to play a lot of multiplayer games, but as I got older, I realized that when I play games, I sort of just don't want anyone to be around me. I'd much rather just do something by myself. I've Even though a lot of like JRPGs take God knows how long to finish, that's sort of where I've spent a lot of my recent years. But I guess
Oh, I
because
see.
when I was growing up, I was playing like a lot of Call of Duty, a lot of Battlefield, and yeah, there's something about competitive games like that which I can't get myself to go back into, and I think it's that same reason that you were saying about League. Obviously, a game of Call of Duty, it doesn't take as long, but it does have like if you have a really bad game, it's gonna basically ruin the rest of the session.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Like for myself, I've always like not always, but usually my most played games all multiplayer games
Mhm.
like League, Counter Strike, RuneScape, I suppose. But I do understand the like I really like competitive games, but at the same time, I kind of feel like the time I spend or have spent on a game such as League is at the same time kind of like a missed opportunity to do something else,
Mhm.
like to play, let's say, campaign games which have a story in them. Like when I spend 100 hours on League, it doesn't really change anything. But when I spend 100 hours on another game,
Mhm.
it might have a story or some elements or something which contributes way more to my life than just another 100 hours of League
Mhm.
upon the thousands which I've already spent on it.
Well, you know what we can talk about? We can talk about RuneScape because I have plenty of experience in that
Oh,
game as well. I
oh, nice.
I spent oh god, how many years? From the update, the Grand Exchange came out. So what, 2007 or
Uh,
so?
yeah, it was
Um,
like after Meet 2007, I suppose.
mhm. So I played from then until about I think it was when the RS3 beta started. So like 2013,
Oh,
2014, whenever that was.
yeah, like after EOC, but yeah, I remember when the RS3 beta came out, like had the fancy UI and render distance and stuff like that.
I remember how much people at the time hated it and just didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, EOC was like evolution of combat. Basically, for those who don't know, like RuneScape has a really unique combat system It's really simple, but at the same time, it's like kind of unique and allows for very interesting mechanics in the game.
Mhm.
But they basically changed that to be something more like uh, some people will be annoyed, but like a World of Warcraft style system where you have abilities and overkill damage and things like that. But a lot of people were really upset at that because it completely changed the game and it was pretty broken at the beginning. Uh, so basically, over half the player base ended up quitting over that update, which is why basically the old school version of the game has been released because a lot of people were complaining to Jagex, which is the owner of the game, to basically bring back the old version of the game. And
Mhm.
they finally did. And now it's like way more popular than the actual modern one.
I didn't realize it was more popular. I knew the player
Yeah.
base of like RS3 was dwindling, but it's been dwindling for a while. Because I remember the first time it started to come down was after like the first one of the first big bot nukes that happened. Um,
Oh,
that was years ago, and I didn't realize how many bot accounts there were until that happened, and then like half the logged in users just disappeared. Um,
yeah.
but it was nice. I went to um it's been so long since I played the game. What was the village that had Draenor Village, the one with all the willow trees? I went there after the
Yeah.
bot nuke happened, and there was like two people there. It was lovely because every time you went there before that, there was always like 20 or 30 players just cutting the trees. They weren't talking, and they were obviously all bots.
Yeah. It's like I remember like in 2011 and 2012 it was really bad. Like everything was just infested with bots because Jagex hadn't really like made a proper anti-bot system
Hmm.
back then. They had some waves of bans, like let's say like they picked a specific area and banned all the players there sometimes, but yeah, the new modern version RS3 has like a really good anti-bot system
Hmm.
basically. Like it's actually pretty impressive because RuneScape is one of those games which is like probably the most botted game of all time, like and really like advanced bots as well. Like because the system is already so advanced that the bots have to get advanced as well. Basically, Jagex hired one of the biggest bot creators to work on an anti-bot system as well. And from what I remember, they said that the systems that they have are so advanced that basically they are able to distinguish between every single player, like non-bot players as well. Like
Hmm.
if I were to play in my account and suddenly log into like I don't know your account,
Hmm.
then they will be able to detect that it's me that logged into your account because it's basically uh, it learns from your behavior that
Hmm.
it's you, like your mouse clicks, your movement speed, all everything like that. And so basically, in old school, they could activate all those systems as well to get rid of all the bots. But I guess the risk is that if you have like false positives, like innocent players being tagged as bots and getting banned,
Hmm.
that's like really bad when you think about it.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
kind of dangerous.
that's definitely true because if the system's not working perfectly, then yeah, that's going to be a problem because RuneScape, as much as I enjoyed the game, a lot of it was really boring. Like if you're trying to grind out a 99, it's
Yeah.
just you put a movie on in the background, like you have your hand just automatically doing stuff, you're not even paying any attention. I think I got 99 fletching before you could just say fletch everything in your inventory. So you had to click one
Yeah.
by one each thing you wanted to fletch.
Oh,
That was hell. Um,
yeah.
people now have it so easy with getting 99. You can just say, "Oh, cook all up, burn all." It's so easy, but that's
Yeah.
just me complaining about. Speaking of hundreds of hours wasted, there's hundreds of hours wasted.
Yeah. RuneScape is like an advanced cookie clicker, basically.
Hmm. But
It's
sorry.
nothing. It's like just a really weird game. Like very often you don't really play the game; you just have it in the background.
Hmm. But what I was gonna say was that we had very different experiences with the game. I saw the video you did on how RuneScape made us fluent. That was actually a
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting video.
Oh, thank you.
So for people who haven't seen it, just give them a quick rundown on what actually what you were talking about in that video, because it actually was
Okay.
a fairly good points you were making there.
Well, basically, the game is like the way the game is built is you can pretty much every item or object or even like some like how do you say it, like environment
Mhm,
objects like rocks and stones, and you can basically click on them and it says, like, it tells you what it's called. Like I can click on a door and it says that it's a door, and so on. And basically the game is when you get in, like when I started playing RuneScape, I was still not fluent in English at all. Like I had just started English lessons in school, so all I knew, like my entire English was based on stuff that I had picked up from movies and games before that, but it was still not enough to even get past like the tutorial and stuff because I didn't really understand the English. But over time, the way the game works is that it's so easy to get started in, like if you just explore, that you don't even need to know English. However, when you play it a lot, when you start understanding, you start like remembering the words
mhm,
which are in the game, such as like how an axe is something that you cut trees with, and a tree is a tree, and what
mhm,
a cow is called, what chickens are called, and so on. And so it also has like this chat box which like logs every action you do in the game. And they are pretty much, when you play the game for hundreds or thousands of hours, you keep seeing the same messages over and over again, and they are all in like um, pretty correct
mhm.
English. So basically, you memorize some of the lines in the game, and by doing so, you basically start seeing the logic behind them. What I'm basically trying to say is that it's a game which is really good at comprehensive input, and comprehensive input is basically understanding some input like a sentence without even needing to without even having needing to look up the words or
Mhm,
something which are in there. Like when I point at an apple and say that is an apple, then even if you don't understand English, you probably know that what an apple is
mhm.
just from that sentence. So RuneScape is pretty much really good at that. And it was probably a large contributor to my own English at the time.
Well, it definitely gave you a lot more opportunities to actually read English, because it's one thing to be assigned readings
Yeah.
in class, but if you're if you just want to play this game, then you have to. Even if you have no idea what's really going on, you sort of have to force yourself to try and work it out. And it does help
Yeah,
that you have
definitely.
like, because you're like clicking on different objects in the game, and you have a visual representation of it. If you don't know like specifically how to actually or what that actually means, you can sort of work it out from the context of what you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's actually really cool. And I saw someone in the comments say it would be really cool for uh something like this to exist for Japanese, and I
Yeah,
also can't think of
absolutely.
anything else that would fit that. Because sadly RuneScape doesn't have a Japanese version. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I really want that as well because
Actually, it would be
there
horrible
are
because I'd
still
start playing the game again and waste all of my life. But apart from
yeah,
that, it would help
yep.
with Japanese learning.
Yeah, for sure. Because like um, even though I actually know like about 5,000 words in Japanese already, there are still a lot of words which I don't know, like
Mhm,
which are in RuneScape, such as types of trees, types of fish, like willow, yew,
mhm,
like oak trees, and so on. I don't really know those. And like it has this really specific vocabulary. It has like thousands of words, which you probably don't encounter in everyday life. Well, you could encounter in everyday life, but you don't learn them from textbooks and so on.
Mhm.
Like I learned Russian in school for 6 years, but never did anyone like the textbook have a word for willow, like the willow tree
Mhm.
and stuff like that. The same way how like games such as Minecraft, I remember there was like I think someone was at the barber that I know, and the barber was talking to another barber, and they were basically talking about how their child already knows some words in English. Like how did my child know what cobblestone is called in Estonia? Like they were speaking in Estonian, of course.
Mhm.
So they were like surprised that their child knew what cobblestone is in English. And it's really obvious where that came from. It's obviously from Minecraft,
Yeah.
basically. And it's like things like that are pretty useful, actually.
Because right now I'm much earlier in the Japanese language learning process. I think I've been doing it for like 2 months or so now.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So something like that. Right now I'm working through Wanikani mainly for vocabulary, and I recently started going through Take Him for grammar stuff.
Yeah.
And I actually that's one thing I do want to talk about. I feel like I don't have that many words to work with right now, but I do know a lot of words from like that I've just heard over time over and over again from watching anime. Like there's some things you will pick up,
Oh
even though
yeah.
you won't pick up most of it. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
the like say for example the how you would write out ice in kanji, but I already knew that was kori. Um
Yeah.
It's just something I'd heard that like over and over again. And where was I going with this? Right, that's where I was going with this. The point that made me realize how much I already happened to know was once I started working through Take Him stuff and realizing how you can actually piece together sentences and not just taking the sentences that were already there, sort of trying to fit other words that I'd heard over time into the sentence to see if it makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's like kind of similar to the RuneScape thing. So like in the video I brought an example of like how there was this feature called Quick Chat, which was basically you could send like messages, like pre-composed messages,
Mhm,
basically. And for example, you could say what your skill is in in a certain skill, I suppose. Like
mhm.
my strength level is that. So you could basically say, you could translate the same thing with a different word as well. For example, my English is not good or whatever. Like uh, those kinds of like when you have some level, like at one point, sentences start like clicking, like the grammar and stuff like starts clicking
Mhm.
with you when you see when you're exposed to it enough.
Yeah,
It
that
becomes
definitely makes
natural.
sense. And the good thing about that quick chat is because it's constructing the sentences for you, it forces I guess a structure that would actually make sense in English.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like when I had to use it, basically all the sentences I sent and saw were correct English,
Mhm,
like grammatically correct, because they were pre-composed. And I remember that when I was in another account or in like other games, usually when people talked, they weren't always native in English. They
mhm.
were often talking in like really broken grammar, really broken English. So I'm not surprised at all that a lot of people who I know had like way more broken grammar than I did at the time, even though like they maybe wrote more in English than I did.
Mhm.
But it's just like they talked to people who also had broken grammar, so they like picked up their patterns and didn't improve on those.
Yeah, that's
One thing I always
uh,
notice in oh sorry.
no, go ahead. There's
Okay.
a bit of a
Well, one
delay
thing I
here that's
always
hard to
notice
deal
is
with.
yeah. One thing I always notice in English is like uh, well, a classic example is how people mess up you, like your and your, like like you are
Mhm.
and yours,
Yeah, yeah.
basically. But uh, what annoys me more is like how people mess up lose and loose.
Mhm.
Like that's like everywhere. I don't know how. Like even I know even video games which have like typos in that. Like Rampage Knights is one,
Mhm.
and I guess it's almost like such a common mistake that some people don't even know which is the correct version.
Yeah, that's how I feel about TO and TOO. I've been speaking English my
Oh,
entire life. I can't remember which is which most of the time.
oh,
I
two and two, I
yeah.
assume.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I I should know, but I I don't know. Everyone already like the thing when you speak to people who are native in a language is they're not going to correct you all of the time when you make a mistake, especially when you're both
yeah,
fluent in a language. Like you can sort of understand the context of what someone's saying if you are fluent in a language, even if what they're saying isn't 100% correct.
yeah. It's like, and also native people in their native language also like often they don't know how to correct you. Like they
Mhm,
just know if something is wrong, but they don't know why it's wrong or how to like explain it. For
mhm,
example, like same way in Estonian, where when somebody like messes up a conjugation, I don't know from the top of my head what it's called, like past perfect something,
mhm,
but like I don't really know how to explain that it's wrong. It's just I know what the correct version is and that the version you said is wrong.
yeah.
And I feel like it's especially common with Japanese. Like uh, one thing is that when a Japanese native tries to correct you, one issue is the English language barrier. Like they might not be completely fluent in English either. And the other thing is just that Japanese is just such a mysterious language. Like for example, the particles, the ga particle, the one which everyone has always trouble with. It's just there is no there is no rule to it. It's just something that you have to learn, like to use through intuition and
Mhm.
naturally.
Yeah, that's the
Like
problem.
the same thing. Oh, okay,
I,
just go ahead.
I, I was gonna say the problem with being something being your first language if you haven't actually studied the grammar is you sort of have a intuitive knowledge of the grammar, but
Yeah,
if you can't even if you learnt it in school, most of what you learnt you've sort of already internalized before that point, and a lot of it is stuff you're not gonna really bother remembering because you already sort of knew it anyway. If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. It's basically you basically have learned the language. Basically you
Mhm.
you just know what's correct or wrong
Yeah,
intuitively, what sounds natural and what doesn't, but
yeah,
you
yeah,
don't know the mathematics behind it.
yeah.
I guess in Estonian there is like in Estonian you have Estonian grammar lessons for up until like the 12th grade, and I think in college as well,
Mhm,
because it's just like speaking wise, it's not really that complicated of a language, but writing is pretty complicated in the
mhm,
sense that you have a lot of rules, like which English doesn't, for example, like where to put a comma. Well, of course, English has that as well, but like the comma rules, where to put a comma is really strict in Estonian and has specific rules.
mhm,
And the other thing is when should you write a word uh, separately? Like often in Estonian, you have two words combined into one. So let's say something like a railway crossing.
mhm,
In English, you just say railway crossing, like separate words. But in Estonian, there is some rule that when you have uh, two words of a specific type, you have to write them together.
mhm,
So it basically becomes railway crossing as one word instead of two. And basically, those things are which even like people, like adults, often like ask over even their children, like, am I supposed to write this word as one or two? Because like they are the ones who are studying it in school, and as an adult, you kind of forget the rules sometimes.
mhm.
But like now, I remember I used to have much more trouble with that as a child in school, but now I just have like an intuitive understanding of it. But even though I don't know the rules at all anymore because I forgot the logic, like I forgot the specific rules.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another big problem you have with speaking with native speakers is you end up coming across, especially when it's a language that's used across many different countries like English is, you'll have different, I guess, colloquialisms based on the country.
Oh yeah.
So if you try to speak to someone who speaks a lot of Australian colloquialisms, it's going to be hard to understand them even as a someone who knows English in Australia, because even between like different areas of the country, some of that is just not used, but you can still roughly get a gist of it, I guess, from I don't know. I guess it's from partially the tone and the situation you're in, but it's hard if it's not your native language, that's for sure. I'm sure that's
Yeah.
true for Estonian as well. There's going to be some shorthand ways of saying things that don't exactly line up with what you'd say in a textbook.
Yeah, it's in Estonia, I guess the good thing with Estonian is that it doesn't exist outside of Estonia, so
Mhm.
it doesn't have a lot of variations.
Right.
And Estonia itself is so tiny that there is like barely any dialects. Like some dialects exist, but they're like so tiny that you don't really encounter them every day, if ever.
Mhm.
And yeah, there is some difference between written and spoken Estonian, but I don't think it's as prominent as it is, for example, in Japanese, where you have apparently also differences between Japanese and, I mean, spoken and written Japanese. Like
Mhm.
when you look up a word in the dictionary, it sometimes just says it's clearly like strictly spoken language,
Mhm.
like a spoken word. Like Japanese is a pretty scary language in that sense. It has a lot of like weird edge cases and stuff.
One of the things I do like about Japanese though is that you have a much more constrained, I guess, what's the word? Much more constrained sound set, I guess would be that's not the correct term at all. But the sounds
Oh,
that
I
exist
get
in the
it.
language is far more restricted than say English, for example.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It's like when you write a word, it's more like you know how to read it most of the time.
Mhm.
Like the syllables are the same sound pretty much every time.
Obviously, there are the exceptions, like how
Yeah,
wa is the ha character, but
yeah,
apart from that, there's not that many weird exceptions.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely a good part. Like a nice feature of Japanese. It's actually really similar to Estonian. Like Estonian is like extreme on that. Like everything you write, you read the exact same way. Like
Mhm.
every letter is always pronounced pretty much the same way. Maybe there are like a few very, very, very like small edge cases there, but yeah, it's like languages which don't have that, like English. Um, for example, you can't have a spelling bee in Estonian because, well, you kind of can, but like English has spelling bees, like competitions for children and
Mhm.
such, because like the language is very often when you pronounce a word, it's very different from how it's written. Like
Mhm.
from like how in my last video, I just made a joke like how I
That
wanted to say pear.
yeah, that pairs.
Yeah. Yeah, like pair as in two items, or pear as in the fruit, or pear as in to trim and such. Like they pretty much sound exactly the same,
Mhm.
but they're different.
Yeah, yeah. That I there's obviously reasons for that, and it's partially because English has it's been a language that has so many influences in it.
Yeah,
Like you've taken it's this language that it's not. I think it's more fair to call English like a meta language. It's something that's taken so many influences and just merged it into itself, and somehow it's managed to work somehow. But when you have a language that's only spoken in a single region, or that region has been fairly closed off for a very long time, you have much less of that variation.
Probably, yeah.
Obviously,
I suppose, like, yeah.
I was going to say Japanese does have the problem now where it's basically becoming English with Japanese grammar, but
Oh, yeah, the loan words.
mhm,
It's, yeah, I was going to say that I suppose it's like, I suppose it has a lot to do with the writing system as well. Like,
mhm,
I suppose not every alphabet just fits every language,
yeah,
but they just use it. Like, for example, Russian has Cyrillic. I hope that's how you say it. And Russian is it's kind of similar in the way that you don't always pronounce the characters the same way you do write them. Like, for example, the O sound often gets converted into A.
mhm,
Like, I can't bring any specific example right now because I haven't accessed my Russian in so long that I can't really recall any words. But well, I can call some. But um, yeah, Russian has that with the A and O sound.
mhm,
But at the same time, I know like Chinese or Mandarin. I think it had like the Romanji version of it was called like Pinyin or something.
mhm,
And I think Pinyin had some issues where the alphabet just didn't work. Like, um, if you use the Latin words, I think they're called, um, I mean letters, they just don't represent the Chinese pronunciation
mhm,
well enough for it to be consistent. Whereas there is like this alternative version. I don't remember what it's called exactly, but it's like an alternative version to basically give readings to Chinese, kind of like hiragana in
mhm.
Japanese, and it's like a completely different alphabet. It's like it's kind of like something that looks like katakana basically, and
Ah,
it's
okay.
supposed to be way more consistent than pinyin, which is like the romanization of Chinese.
Mhm,
So I think there is like this issue of mismatched alphabets in languages because every language which uses the same alphabet still sounds a bit different.
mhm. Well, the same problem does exist. I don't know why people keep trying to do this. Like when you like early on learning Japanese, you'll run into a lot of resources that try to romanize the words rather than teaching
Oh
you
yeah.
hiragana first. Because the problem you get with romanizing the words is exactly that problem, where you have different resources that will interpret it in a slightly different way, and there's just no
Yeah.
consistency that can exist. But Japanese doesn't need to have that problem because hiragana does exist.
Yeah, it's and like for some reason a lot of people have resistance against learning hiragana.
Hmm.
Well, which is not as common, but I've seen posts on Reddit and on other forums of people asking like how far can they get in Japanese? Like, can they get fluent in Japanese without learning hiragana at all? Like saying that they have already learned for like 2 months and they don't want to start learning hiragana and they only use romanji. And it's like it's so weird to me because hiragana was like the easiest part of Japanese. I learned it in like 2 days, I
Oh
think,
yeah,
with Duolingo, and it
hiragana is easy.
didn't take any effort at all.
Yeah,
And
I
the
feel the exact same
same,
way about. Honestly, I'm surprised they
yeah,
managed to find 2 months worth of work to do without learning hiragana.
yeah. I don't even know how they find like the resources for that.
I guess okay. If you want to count not being able to read anything and being able to speak, maybe you can become fluent. I don't know,
Yeah,
but not being able to read anything, you're not going to get very far.
yeah. It honestly feels so much more difficult as well. It's like if you want to look something up in a dictionary,
Hmm.
you have to every time have to find the Romanification of it as well.
Hmm. You know,
I
just
suppose there
stick it in
is
Google Translate. It's
okay.
fine.
Yeah. I guess Google Translate does give a Romanification of the writing as well.
Mm.
And I guess a lot of people have the same thing against kanji, which is like way more common though than against hiragana. But like a lot of people don't want to learn kanji at first. Like a very common complaint, which I didn't include in the video against the Duolingo Japanese course, is that it starts throwing kanji at you pretty early on. And a lot of people don't like that. Like even in the comments of like the lessons, like lecture comments,
Hmm.
basically in Duolingo, I've always seen in the early stages how a lot of people complain about, why are you showing us kanji already? This is like the third lesson or something. And to me, it kind of feels weird. Like I feel like getting into kanji early on is a really like good idea in the sense that it. I don't think you, other than maybe knowing hiragana,
Hmm.
you don't really need any prerequisites for like getting familiar with kanji or learning words with kanji,
Hmm.
because that, like, if you don't, then basically what happens is those like simplified news and stuff which the Japanese government provides, which
Hmm.
is basically no kanji at all hiragana,
Oh, that
and
sounds
it's like,
horrible to read.
yeah, it's so impossible to read because it's so hard to tell what those words actually are, because Japanese has like so many words which are written the exact same way. So without kanji, you can't even tell what word it is.
Hmm.
And I remember, I think the JLPT N4 and N5 tests also, like N5 especially,
Hmm.
has like most of the like writing is hiragana, and they don't include kanji at all, because it seems that, I suppose, language classes, like Japanese language classes, kind of teach in this way that they don't introduce kanji until later. Like they focus on full hiragana at first.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it feels like it feels unnecessary. I don't think you really gain anything from that. And
Well,
like,
I don't think there's no
yeah, I
reason
don't
to.
know.
I understand wanting to mainly focus on hiragana, at least getting to the point where you're actually able to relatively quickly read it, but I don't think there's any reason to avoid it because, especially when you're reading stuff on your computer, there's plugins for your browser to add furigana to basically any website. And if you
Yeah.
can't read the kanji, there's ways you can get around that early on, and then once and that actually will help you in some way to sort of understand the reading of that kanji, while also not introducing the problem of there being no word borders because you still don't know about grammar either, so you have no idea how to read anything.
Yeah. I suppose it's like, I suppose it can be like, if it's focusing primarily on hiragana at first, it's like can be good hiragana reading practice. But at the same time, I feel like you can still get the reading practice with furigana, like you
Mhm.
said. But I suppose it's like language classes often focus on early output, like speaking the language.
Mhm.
So maybe that's why they like don't focus so much on reading it.
Yeah, that seems to how it was when I didn't do the Japanese class at my university, but I know some people who did, and that
Oh,
seems to be the way they structured it as well. Like they could read a little bit of like very basic kanji by the end, like numbers and things like that, but
oh,
most of what they'd focused on was being able to do things like have a very simple conversation.
yeah. It seems to be that language classes. I made a video about my experience with Russian lessons as well for 6 years,
Hmm.
and it seems that language classes, they focus a lot on early output. Like I can kind of understand that because um, they often, language classes have a specific goal they want to get to, and most people who take language classes, I suppose, are people who just like want to or need to output already.
Hmm.
Like when you're learning on your own, you have the freedom or flexibility of like um, only focusing on input at first, because you don't have a need to output unless you want to, of course.
Hmm.
So you don't really need to focus on getting your like output ability or grammar to be top notch before you have like learned a nice amount of vocabulary and get an intuition in the language. Because like in the Russian lessons like when I learned Russian in school, there was such a huge focus on grammar,
Hmm.
and I had like no intuitive understanding of the language. The language wasn't intuitive to me at all.
Hmm.
But the way it basically taught Russian was to like mathematically. I had to like use these tables of conjugations and basically do addition of words,
Hmm.
like choose the correct conjugation and basically like output in that way. And it's like it did get my grammar. Like I do remember that it did like I still remember some of the grammar pretty well, like some of the conjugations. But at the same time, it's like I feel like I spent so much time on it, and it was such a fucking miss. Oh, I'm not sure if I can swear,
No, you
but
can say whatever you want. I don't care.
oh, okay, all right. It was just such a miserable experience that I absolutely hated Russian in
Hmm.
school. It was so terrible. And I assume a large part of it is because it's focusing on rote memorization of words and
Yep.
brute forcing grammar. And I absolutely hate that. Maybe that's why I still can't stand Genki textbooks at all. I just don't want to see that kind of stuff anymore.
I've heard a lot of good things about Genki. I might pick them up at some point. But I don't know. I feel sort of the same way about it. Like I did a year of German in my early years of
Oh,
school. But the nice thing about German is very similar to English. So it's much oh, sorry, it's much hard. It's much easier. I can't even speak my own language. It's much easier to actually teach that to an English speaker. It's sort of, at least early on, a lot of it is just sort of learning words. The grammar structure is very similar,
oh yeah.
but I don't remember any of that. I think it, I think I can remember like a couple of numbers, and that's about it.
Oh, rip. Yeah, I think like German was like one of those, like one step above in difficulty in languages such as French when it came to an English speaker trying to learn it.
Mhm.
Like it should take about, well, this is like some random website estimate, like 750 hours to get quote unquote fluent in German
Mhm.
for an English native. Um, Japanese being the hardest, of course. Uh, but yeah, it's like, I feel like if those if somebody who is an English native were to learn German, they're much better off focusing primarily on vocabulary at first and getting like a feel for the language and then getting into the grammar. Because if it's already similar to German, I mean to English, if
Mhm.
German is already similar to English, I feel like uh, just knowing the vocabulary makes you already proficient enough in the language to like consume it at a pretty good, like you can start immersing really early on if you just know certain vocabulary,
Mhm.
I suppose.
Yeah, it also
and
does
and
help that English, as I was saying earlier, is basically the language of loan words, and a lot of
yeah.
there's a lot of German words already in English, just pronounced slightly differently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess a lot of languages take loan words from Germany, it seems.
Mhm. We were talking about the kanji problem before. I think the reason why a lot of people are really afraid of kanji is because they look at how many words they need to learn and don't really look at a strategy to learn it. They just think, I have no idea how I'm going to learn 3,000 words. That seems impossible.
Yeah.
But there's all of these strategies that exist now, whether that's doing it through one ikani through an SRS system, whether you do it through memorizing the symbols, uh, but don't actually remember the readings, and you just learn I guess a lookup table of symbols, and then afterwards you learn the readings, or you start going from like vocabulary first. There's all these ways you can approach it, but if you just look at it
Yeah.
as I'm gonna try to rote memorize 3,000 symbols. That just seems impossible.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like, even though SRS and such things like that are now like everywhere
Mhm.
in terms of language learning communities. But uh, a lot of people still have the assumption that you have to learn languages in the same way you have to learn them in school. So
Mhm.
with rote memorization and things like that. And yeah, that's why everybody in, I remember there's this like, even in Russian class, I remember the teacher once said that Russian, like when a kid, maybe it was me who messed up some like Russian sentence or something. And
Mhm.
the teacher basically said that, like, come on, Russian ain't so hard. It's not Chinese or something. But in reality, I feel like Chinese grammar is way simpler than Russian grammar. It's just like you have to learn the words.
Mhm.
And of course, if you try to rote memorize Chinese characters, then it's a fucking complete nightmare. But I feel like if you use SRS, it's a completely different story. Like you said, how I think Vanikani is a pretty good resource as well. I haven't used it myself.
If anyone
Um,
wants to get a One subscription, just buy it at the end of the year because they always do like a half price sale.
oh, all right. I suppose Vanikani works in the way that it kind of like builds up, like bottom up, like shows you the radicals
Mhm.
first,
Yeah.
and then builds upon the other compounds. But the way I learned was basically I just downloaded the Core 2K deck basically, which is just like word. Like
Mm.
it shows you a word, then it's reading, and then example sentence, and has audio for it.
Mhm.
And so basically, I didn't learn kanji separately. I do that now, but I do it like one kanji per day, and I don't. It doesn't really feel like I'm. I keep forgetting them, basically.
Mhm.
Uh, but at the same time, I haven't learned any radicals. I haven't really learned kanji, but I can read like 5,000 words without issues. Like
Mhm.
I feel like it's pretty flexible how you learn kanji. Like I said, I didn't learn kanji separately, and I didn't learn radicals or anything. I just learned the words, and it seems to work. Like
Mhm.
it's probably not efficient, as easy to memorize words when you haven't learned the kanji, but it seems to work still. So if you don't want to do that, you don't need to do it. You can just like learn the words directly and memorize like the way they look. I can say right now though that if you want to handwrite kanji in Japanese, then you probably have to learn kanji separately, because I cannot handwrite any kanji at all. I can't even handwrite like hiragana and katakana because I haven't practiced it
Oh,
at all.
I think you can handwrite one kanji. If you can't do the kanji for one, I'd
Okay.
be really sad.
Okay. Well, yeah, sure. I guess I can do those,
One, two,
but
and three. If you can't do those, I'd be really worried.
yeah.
But no, I get your point. Yeah, I haven't started with handwriting either.
I feel like if I'm going to learn handwriting, then it's going to be the last thing.
Mhm.
Like it's it's I haven't had a single need for it yet, but I
Mhm.
assume if I were to, like, let's say, I don't know, move to Japan, then it would be very, very necessary
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah, that would definitely be the case. I personally don't have any interest in doing that. I'm learning Japanese entirely for my weeb reasons. No, nothing else. For sure,
Yeah,
that's what
it's
most people do.
yeah. Honestly, I've been thinking of this, like, maybe I actually want to kind of make a video on this as well, but like the reasons to learn a language, like for no reason at all, is a completely valid reason.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people get stuck on this idea that when you learn a language, it has to be practical. It
Yeah.
has to uh, like which language should I learn? Which language is the most valuable to learn? Like then people say, oh, you should learn Chinese because Chinese is the language of the future and whatever.
Hmm.
And it's like I feel like most people who start learning a language with the assumption that it's going to be practical for them with no other reasons at all, they're most likely going to give up at some point because it's just not worth the effort.
Yeah.
Uh, and you are way more likely to actually get fluent in the language if you just enjoy learning it. Like if you just learn it for fun, or if you just like look forward to doing something in the language, like you said, like the weeb reasons. For me, it's quite a lot because I just enjoy learning a language, and I just enjoy learning Japanese. And
Mhm.
it has like a novelty to it. I have some. I'm like a really low level weeb myself. Like I don't watch that much anime, but I do watch it sometimes. And I suppose when I get more fluent in Japanese, then I'll watch way more, especially when it comes to immersion. I'll have to start doing that basically. And there's a lot of fun content in Japanese which I'd like to access basically. The same way with Russian. Like when I started learning Russian again, um, what I looked forward to was basically browsing the Russian internet, like
Mhm.
just exploring the Russian YouTube and uh, like forums and things like that, because it like knowing the language kind of opens a door for you to another world in a way. So when I started learning Japanese, I have actually spent a lot of time just like for fun watching videos about Japanese culture, about Japanese as a language, about some random, I don't know, uh, just aspects of Japan, like hobbies people have and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. And before, I didn't really have that drive to watch things like that. But just learning the language, like starting to learn it, basically brought the interest in those to me as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it with immersion, if you're not enjoying the content you're trying to consume, then I would if I didn't enjoy anime, I wouldn't watch anime to try to do immersion. That would be a horrible idea. You'd end up giving up really quickly. And it's
Yeah,
gonna be true for anything else. Like, if, for example, I could use like Japanese news for immersion, but I would give up after like 2 days because that sounds
yeah,
incredibly boring. So if you can
yeah,
find a language, and this goes back to the idea of learning a language for just for the sake of it being practical, if you're trying to do that and you're not actually enjoying the experience, you realize that a lot of like the language learning process is really boring, and especially the points where you're not making much progress. Luckily, in the early stages, I'm still making quite a bit, but I do hear there's like a wall you'll eventually get to in Japanese where you know enough that you can sort of understand stuff, and you are at the point now where you're not really making any like visible progress. And
yeah,
if you're not enjoying the just I guess the if you're not enjoying the grind and enjoying like the content you're trying to use for immersion, there's no way you're going to keep it up.
yeah, absolutely. Like, uh, I actually talked about this as well in like two videos I made. One thing was when I learned Russian in school, I had no motivation to learn Russian at all.
Mhm.
So that was like, if I had at least been motivated to learn Russian, maybe Russian wouldn't have been so terrible in school. But I absolutely hated it in every way because I didn't even want to learn it.
Maybe if you
So
had
it was
Russian
like
RuneScape.
yeah, maybe. But like afterwards, after I had graduated and like after I started learning Russian on my own, it was a completely different thing. Like
Mhm.
then I started like seeking out things which are fun in Russian, and like and then the novelty like of knowing Russian started like showing how it can be fun and whatever. And the same thing in like Japanese. Um, like you said, the immersion part and the intermediate, I suppose, intermediate hell or something, where you aren't making visible progress. I feel like for me, I'm not sure if I've hit that yet. Like, I assume I kind of have, but at the same time, I feel like it doesn't hit me mentally that much
Mhm.
because I don't expect, like, I'm already aware of
Yeah.
and I don't expect to be fluent or like competent until maybe a few years from now. Like, I suppose I have patience for that. So,
Well, you did 6
um,
years of Russian, so it's not like it's your
yeah,
first time.
yeah, I did 6 years of Russian and basically became the same level I was in Japanese in like 6 months or something because it was like extremely inefficient
Mhm.
the way the classes worked. But um, so basically, I feel like the way I learn Japanese is like I could have started immersing way earlier.
Mhm.
I still don't immerse enough, basically, but it's because I'm kind of like doing the pre-grind.
Mhm.
Like I feel like I feel like it's not that necessary to immerse when you don't even have a proper vocabulary built up. You can immerse and it definitely will be beneficial, but I feel like you get so much more benefit out of immersion when you already have a decent vocabulary.
Mhm.
Just because like you can comprehend way more, way faster, and you don't have to spend like most of the time just understanding nothing and looking up words. And like I feel like I've noticed this already as well. Like when I haven't really immersed that much before, but now when I do immersion, like I started watching this YouTube series on in Japanese, and basically even the first 10 videos or so I watch, I feel like I'm picking up so much stuff. Like it's words I already know, but just like the way he uses those words and
Mhm.
like the expressions he makes with those words, like how he like what kinds of words he overuses, and like those patterns, like how I say like a lot right now,
I
things like that.
Yeah, if people who watch my videos know that I say so way too much. If you do a
Uh,
drinking game where you drink every time I say so, you will die in like 10 minutes. It's a
yeah,
I have the exact same problem. I try to
yeah,
counteract it, and whenever I counteract it, I switch it up with another word. It's one of those words that or one of those things where you're trying to fill a bit of airtime and you're not really sure what to say. So I think it's
yeah,
better than saying I find to be really annoying, but filling out with
yeah.
like or so, it it seems better in your head until someone points it out to you and then you realize, wait, no, this is just as bad, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. And actually, interestingly enough, like those it was something specific, like what it was called in Japanese, but basically those words, like those filler words,
Mhm.
like ano, eto, like using those actually makes you sound way more fluent or
Mhm.
like native, like than if you just like were completely silent or say like the English equivalent of those, like speaking Japanese and then suddenly saying and
Mm.
so on.
I think it makes sense in a real world conversation. It's when you
Yeah.
are trying to make videos and that comes across, that's when I think it becomes a bit of a problem. But that's not most people
Oh
don't
yeah.
have to deal with that issue.
Yeah. It's actually funny, like people actually use those filler words so many times. Like they don't even notice in when they listen or say those, but like when you do transcribing, like when you write subtitles for a show or video or
Mhm.
something, and now people are automating those with like algorithms like deep learning, machine learning. When you check the when you activate the automatic subtitles on YouTube, cuts all those like ums and words like that out of the script.
Mhm.
And that's actually like a huge problem in I don't remember what it was called, like stop words or something, in machine learning, like removing those sounds and stuff from the script because they are really unnecessary. So if you have like speech to text, you don't really want it to be filled with filler words all the
Mhm.
time.
I think the one issue that happens when you do start to um remove those words from a script, and this is a problem that I didn't realize until I started learning about grammar, is a lot of those things actually do mean something. Like you'll try, like I didn't realize what dane meant until like a couple of days ago when I started going through Take Him's guide. I was like, wait, that's a way you can like end a sentence with uh, a question looking for a positive answer. I had no idea because I'd try to like
Oh
look it
yeah.
up and I couldn't find anything on it. But the second you realize that, you're like, wait, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Those those had some specific name as well, like the um, sentence ending words,
Yeah, yeah. I can't
like
remember the
dane,
actual term for it. But
and yeah, like I feel like those are something that you need to get immersion in, like even not like from shows or movies or anime, but like even something like YouTube videos or just real life conversations, because the way people, like, when you have never heard how people actually use them, it's like you don't really know how should you use them. Like if I write a sentence and say like and use ne at the ending, does it sound natural or does it sound weird?
Mm.
Like when I wrote some sentences and I put ne in the ending, one of my Japanese friend basically said that it kind of sounds like really feminine, and I
Hmm.
didn't even realize that. And so now I've been listening or watching some like YouTube videos in Japanese, and it's like they actually use those all the time, those endings, and I guess that's a nice way to get an understanding of those.
Hmm. And going back to the idea of early immersion, there's one benefit of actually doing that really early, even if you don't really understand the words that are being said. It's for listening practice.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure. Like
because if you can't really determine what sounds you're really hearing, it's going to be much harder to, I guess, go through that later on when you actually do understand the vocabulary.
yeah, I actually had like issues with listening before. I couldn't really pick up anything through listening. Not anything, but like uh, I just my listening ability wasn't that great before
Hmm.
until I like actually immersed a bit more, and now I feel it's all right. Um, Whereas like I had a friend who also learned Japanese, who like he watched like 1,000 episodes of anime, like One Piece or something,
Hmm.
and when you immerse with through listening so much, you basically, even though your vocabulary might be not as strong as someone else's, your listening ability will be way stronger. And that was an issue I had, which was lacking for me for sure. And so I can definitely say that if you care about listening, then it's good to get some listening practice early on too.
I think that's one of the few things about Japanese I might actually be decent at because oh lord, I've watched like too much anime. So in my early days,
Oh,
I would watch basically everything that was airing, and I looked at my list, and there's like 300 days worth of stuff watched. So
uh,
which is too much. I wouldn't recommend it, especially when most of it wasn't very good. But it does definitely give you an advantage to, or give you an opportunity. Sorry, give you an opportunity to listen to like native speakers speak, even though what they're saying and the vocabulary they're using isn't really what you're going to hear a lot of the time in I guess regular conversations. It still lets
yeah.
you, because of how strict Japanese is with the way that um the sounds are actually made. Still gives the opportunity to like work out how the language actually sounds.
Yeah, it makes you familiar with the sounds of the language.
Hmm. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Um. Oh, okay. So, how are you actually like? What resources are you actually using for learning Japanese right now?
Okay, so I'm still mainly using the same deck, which I have been using since my first 2 weeks of Japanese. So the Core 2K and 6K Japanese vocabulary, like optimized order or whatever. Like it was some common deck, which was like my friend used it, so I started using it as well
Hmm.
when I got started, and it's a pretty common deck. It actually came from like I guess it's like stolen content actually. I'm not really sure, but it's like I guess they're from iknow.jp, like a website for learning Japanese,
Well, I'm
which
not good.
is
I'm
like
not going to encourage it, but you can get a. Someone has extracted all of one Ikani out into an Anki deck. I'm not going to tell you how to find it. You can find it though.
yeah, it's basically something similar,
Hmm.
basically something extracted from a website. And I'm like, I just want to finish that. I'm like, I have only less than 1,000 words to go, and I'm taking 5 new words per day. I used to take 10, and then that got overwhelming, so I took 6, and then that got overwhelming, so now I'm taking 5, which
Mhm.
is like a sweet spot right now. So I want to finish that, and before I used to like I have a lot of different Anki decks as well, which I've made myself mostly. Like like some grammar points such as conjugations, like past form, te form, passive form, um, things like that. And then I took the Daikim's grammar guide
Mhm.
and the complete guide to Japanese. I also read through that. The way that what I think about the Daikim's uh, book is that I feel like it's not necessary to like memorize everything at first.
Mhm.
Like I feel like reading through the book, even if you like forget everything almost right after, is still fine, because what it basically does is it kind of like when you encounter some grammatical like concept in immersion or wherever, you might remember that something similar was covered in the book. So
Mhm.
you can basically look it up in the book and get more explanations from there. So basically, that's what I did. I read through it, forgot everything, but I kind of remembered if something was covered or not.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, that's how basically I learned grammar. I'm not fluent in grammar. Like, I feel like learning grammar early on is not like I did like focus way more on it early on, like when it getting started. I think that's fine because otherwise you're just going to be lost in the language. But like the more advanced grammar and stuff, you don't have to learn that early. I feel like it's better if you like are aware of it, but if you don't really understand it yet, I think it's okay because you'll probably understand it with immersion
Mhm.
over time. And after I finished the Core 2K6K deck, I think then, so in like 200 days or something, I think then I'm going to start focusing on immersion a lot.
Mhm.
Like, then that's the time where it's time to have fun basically with the language. And then I'm going to make basically mine sentences and vocabulary and whatever through immersion and see what happens.
Mhm.
So to give a short rundown again, um, I basically don't use anything other than the core 2K6K deck right now, and some decks I've made myself. And sometimes I still visit the Takim's Guide to Grammar.
The way that I'm working through Take Him right now is after every chapter, what I'll do is I'll go back through the examples that were there, and then, as I was saying earlier, I try to like play around with what was there. So, for example, with the chapter on what let's just pick one. Uh, let's say sentence ending particles. So this is yo
Oh
and
yeah,
ne. Uh,
you had the same one we talked about.
yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, we'll go with a different example. Let's go with adjectives. Yeah, we'll go with adjectives. Um, so this goes over e and na adjectives. So I'll go back through the examples that were there because Take Him does a good job with including like a conversation that you would see happen, and then try to
Yeah,
like go through that and change up the conversation a bit, maybe make it about some different topic or something like that, just so I can, I guess, more ingrain the knowledge about the grammar rules. But I don't, as you were saying, I don't think even by the end of this I'm gonna remember everything perfectly. And then when
yeah,
I come across things I don't know, I could go back and say, okay, well, here's this thing that I know I covered, but I'm not exactly
yeah,
sure the way you're supposed to handle it.
yeah. Exactly. Pretty much like uh, that's pretty much how I did it as well. Like early on, I focused way more on reading the book, and I like, for example, the same adjectives section. It has like the e adjectives and na adjectives, and
Mhm.
they have like certain rules. Like certain words need to use the na particle before the noun and whatever. And I feel like I didn't ever really like try to brute force memorize those rules, and because it's like now that I've gotten more like intuition in the language, I feel like it comes naturally. Like
Mhm,
I automatically put the na before the noun when it's necessary, even though I don't even think about it. It just like automatically pops into my head that it sounds more natural if I add the na particle there.
mhm.
But well, my output isn't that great, I assume, because I haven't really. I don't think it's a problem either that my output is not perfect, but because it's like it just improves over time
Mhm.
by getting better intuition in the language.
One way that I see it, like in a lot of places, it's difficult to find native speakers of a language because you're not in the country where people would natively speak it. But one way I see that has been quite popular with lots of viral videos happening of it is people playing VR chat and going into some of the language specific rooms. That
Oh
seems to
yeah,
be a fairly decent way to find people who actually, if not native speakers, at least people who are fluent in the language.
yeah. Uh, I've actually done that with Japanese. I haven't really spoken myself, but I visited VR chat and I've like listened,
Mhm,
just like out of curiosity and uh, just explored around. And yeah, there are a lot of like I know certain servers which had like a lot of Japanese people, like almost like crowded
mhm,
in the place. And yeah, it's like it's a genuine way to basically have a conversation or listen to a natural conversation or just have fun in a
mhm,
way. Like it's, I assume it's much less stressful as well because the game is kind of like memey and stuff.
mhm.
So yeah, it's a decent resource, I suppose. Like something to visit from time to time for fun.
I would definitely be in the same position of not saying anything. I can do
Yeah,
a self introduction that I prepared earlier, but that's about as far as I'm gonna get with that.
yeah. I guess like um I have like some level of like uh I kind of like prefer just listening or getting input right now other
Mhm,
than instead of outputting. Like I could, but it's like at the same time it's like I already know that I kind of suck and that I will be better later on, but
mhm,
so I kind of haven't really done that. Like I'm in a server basically which has a lot of Japanese natives and I actually read the server for quite a lot, but I don't like actually talk anything
mhm,
in there at all. I don't say send a single message. But I think it's fine. Like I actually tried speaking or talking or writing like way earlier, like a year ago,
mhm,
and it was pretty painful. Like in the sense that um, if I just want to say something simple, I often end up like trying to fact check myself. Like, is this the correct grammar? Is this the right vocabulary, and so on.
mhm,
And it's like even output feels so much more painful early on than if I just like knew it more naturally
mhm,
already. So I think I think I'm pretty big on like late output.
mhm,
The same way with English, basically. Like spoken English. I actually haven't spoken English almost at all in my life, other than English classes. Like even like in video games, I barely ever spoke English,
mhm,
like with English natives, and so that's kind of why when I started, like the most I've spoken English in my life is probably the YouTube videos I'm making now. And there is like a clear improvement from my first video to my last video.
mhm,
And I hope like with more practice and so on, like my English keeps on improving, like my spoken English. And that's like I feel like if my even though my English isn't perfect by any means, like spoken English, I still have an accent and whatever. I stumble on my words sometimes, and but I feel like if I got more practice, it will probably improve way more than it. Like I would be much, my English would be much smoother than it is right now. But at the same time, if my Japanese ended up being like my English is currently, without me even really trying to output like practice spoken English or spoken Japanese at all, I would be pretty happy. Like I think it's all right if you have like some level of accent in Japanese if
mhm.
like you're okay with it. But I feel like my English is like a good example of how you don't really need to go out your way and like get early speaking practice.
Hmm.
But I suppose in some ways uh, it can be hard if you start speaking from like if you start speaking early and you start like you're get into the habit of pronouncing some letters or sounds differently, like your tongue position. Like, for example, how I say the T in English, my tongue is like in the middle of my roof, but I think like the middle of my mouth, basically, but I think it should be behind my teeth, for example. Uh, I feel like those are
Yeah,
kind of
that
bad
sound
habits.
that this is back to the problem of being a native speaker. I had to think about that for a moment. Yeah, that does sound about
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and like I guess I should like if I wanted to really improve my English output right now, like spoken English, I'd have to like start looking into how should my tongue be positioned and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And maybe getting like that knowledge from early on can be useful though. Like right now I just don't really like I intuitively can tell that my English is wrong in some aspects. Like I just try to, I know what it's supposed to sound like in my head, but when I say it, it just sounds different because, and I don't really know what's wrong until I realize, oh, my tongue is in the wrong position and so on.
Hmm. Well, what I'll say is that if you don't bother to do anything with your English, it's better than some people I know who are native speakers. So it's perfectly fine.
Well, I guess I can communicate at least.
Hmm. Well, I think it does help you've been doing it for a very long time. And if you had done the same thing with Japanese, how long have you been speaking or learning English for, I guess?
Uh, I guess from I think guess I started in like 2008 in school, but before that I got like like a tiny bit of English immersion from like games already.
Hmm.
So I guess like 13 years, I suppose.
Yeah, I would hope that you would be at a decent level after 13 years of Japanese then.
Yeah, for sure. Like um I remember when I started English lessons like in school, I had already picked up some words from quote unquote immersion
Hmm.
from before that. Like I had played some English games and so on. And I remember like the teacher used to I used to ask the teacher like, wait, isn't this like written a different way? Like the word like what's up. I used to think like as a kid that it's spelled like WASSUP, like what's up instead of what's up. And like the teacher got actually really angry, like if I say it's written like this, it's written like this, stop asking me like if it's written a different way. Because yeah, I was really excited to learn English, I suppose,
Hmm.
because like everything I liked was in English. So
I don't know what it is about just learning anything in school, but it just makes it far, far more boring. Even if you,
yeah.
if even if it's something that you really enjoy, like I first started programming in high school, and I found the classes to just be just obnoxiously boring. And
Yeah.
when I went on to do it by myself and then go on to do it at a university, it was a much different experience, especially with university because it's much more, I guess, especially with my degree, much more self-directed learning.
Oh.
Um, what was I saying, but yeah, I don't know what it is about that. Like, there's certain topics I learned at school, which going back and looking at it, it's something I would really enjoy. But maybe it's just this way that classes are structured, or maybe it's something about the school environment that I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like well, there are like multiple reasons, I suppose. Like for example, Russian um like I said before, I just didn't have interest in learning the language, and I was forced to do it, and it
Hmm.
was fucking hard as well. So it was like it just put me off learning Russian. Like
Hmm.
it just was an uncomfortable experience. But at the same time, like a lot of different classes as well in school, they have a bottom up approach.
Mhm.
So it's like they get into the really low level details at first before they get into like the good parts.
Mhm.
Like this, there's when I was learning deep learning, I used this course called Fast AI,
Mhm.
and the premise of the course is basically that instead of teaching you how deep learning works on like the low level, they instead do it top down. So they like at first they let you like play with the networks, and then they teach how it works. So like the analogy is basically that if you if you made kids instead of uh, letting them play baseball, you started teaching them how like physics work behind throwing a ball or
Mhm.
like pitching, then they will instantly get bored of it and not like baseball. But in reality, like baseball is like playing the game, not the fine details. You can learn the fine details later. You don't need to learn them right now. And the same way with math, like a lot of I've heard a lot of people complain how like schools make math look terrible, just really boring. They like remove the art of math from math itself by
Mhm.
basically teaching it bottom up and never showing the real like beauty of math. And I feel like that's what schools do for like every subject. They just go like bottom up instead of top down, or like they don't give the big picture to you. Like why physics can be exciting or why math can be nice, and like and at the same time I feel like the way school works is it basically tries to prepare you for science, like
Mhm.
for research and stuff like that, but it never really explains it. And if I had like that knowledge back then, maybe I would have been way more like interested in learning stuff in school than I was. I remember I asked teachers, "Why are we learning this? Like, why do we need this in life?" And they none of them, like, I was that annoying kid who always asked that,
Mhm.
and none of them like knew how to answer that. To the point where they just got annoyed and told me to like stop asking that. So yeah, I had like no motivation in school at all. But if I were to go back right now to school, I would be much more motivated because I like see the big picture now.
Mhm.
Like, for example, something like biology would be way more exciting for me now than it was in the past. And the same way with like STEM areas like physics and math and so on.
Yeah, that definitely does make sense. I'm thinking back on when I did my AI class, and it's definitely did start from the ground up because the first I think 6 weeks were on probability theory and Bayes'
Yeah,
theorem, which is just really boring, especially when you're not sure how it actually can be used to what you're be used in like AI. You're just like, okay, well, this is how all of these mathematical functions work, but what exactly is the point of this?
yeah, like exactly. It's like um, when I started learning machine learning, I also like read from everywhere that you need to know probability and statistics, and you need to know calculus and
Hmm.
linear algebra and stuff like that. And I also learned like probability and statistics at first. I did a course on that, and then I was like, this is like so boring. I kind of want to get into the good stuff already.
Hmm.
So I started doing some AI course, and it was like I didn't really. It was just AI, not machine learning. So it was like those breadth for like depth first
Ah, yep,
search
yep.
and yeah, those ones like algorithms. And that wasn't also what I wanted to learn. Even though people said that you should learn those first before you start learning machine learning,
Hmm.
but I just, at one point, I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to try this machine learning course. And if it's too hard, then I'll go back and learn like math and stuff. But what I discovered is that I actually didn't need the math. Like I actually became competent in like solving problems with AI without needing to know calculus like to that level. To like, I don't really need to understand how backpropagation works to know how to use deep learning.
Hmm.
And like that was like way more motivating than having this barrier of needing to learn all these prerequisites. And I feel like it's the same with learning languages in school. They try to teach you grammar and stuff like that so early on, instead of like letting you build an intuition, or like letting you play around with the language, or like
Mhm.
giving you the big picture of the language.
But this takes us all the way back to where we started with when you do self-learning, you can sort of direct it exactly the way that you want to direct it.
Yeah, it's I like self-learning way more than I like learning in school. Like, uh, I went to like when I had like programming classes, or like uh, I really like video editing, like I said before.
Mhm.
But when I had classes for video editing in school, I hated it like right away. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, I was surprised myself. Like, wow, this really sucks. Like, I was not motivated at all. I
Mhm.
just like it. Like, comes out. I just like learning on my own and doing like what I want. I'm making what I want to make, instead of like, okay, make this specific one video which has these elements in it. Like, that isn't what I want to make. That isn't like, I want to experiment with my own ideas and things like that. So what I find is that when I'm forced to do something, like when I'm told what I need to do, then I just lose motivation somehow.
Mhm. With the with directing yourself, I think this is one of the benefits that you get from, platforms like YouTube, because if you want to go learn, how, I don't know, some random part of AI works without having to go through an entire course, there'll be, say, like 10 or 20, maybe even hundreds of videos on something like backpropagation, and you can go and learn about
Yeah.
that specific concept. Or if you want to go, I don't know, you want to suffer and go learn Bayes' theorem, there'll be something specifically on that, and you can go and consume that in the order you actually want to consume it.
Yeah. And like, I kind of like online courses as well.
Hmm.
Uh like how I just like, if there's something specific I want to learn, I can just take a specific course on it, like linear
Hmm.
algebra and probability and statistics and stuff like that. But in college, or in school, often it's like you have um, like those few classes that you feel like you need, but very often you have to take like other classes as
Hmm.
well, which you don't need. You just have to take them, and especially in like high school and stuff like that, like how we had music classes for like 12 years, and it's
Wow.
not even like
Okay.
playing. Yeah, it's not even like playing instruments or anything. It's like, I don't know,
Like
like
music theory.
kinda, yeah, and like just learning facts, like what year
Oh,
was, like, yeah, like
yeah. If you want to
who
make
were
school
who
really
were
boring,
authors
get
of.
get kids to memorize specific dates.
Yeah, it was like learning dates and stuff like that. And like I guess some parts were fun, in the sense that like it's nice to have the cultural knowledge, but at the same time, I feel like it's way more exciting to learn those things on your own than it is to like being forced
Hmm.
to learn those.
Yeah, and when you have it's a bit harder with high school and before that, because there's usually a much more rigid of a structure of what they have to teach. I don't know what it's like for you, but Australia has a curriculum that teachers have to teach towards. Um, but once you move past that into university, then it's really dependent on the sort of teach you end up getting. I've had some lecturers who actually really understood like learning dates. There's no reason to be doing that. He in the first week of the class, he said, if I would fail my own exam, I'm not going to make that exam. And he doesn't remember. He has no ability to remember dates, so he's like, I'm not going to put him in there. I'm going to structure it in
Oh,
a way that you're going to be. I think that course was on like the fundamentals of computing, so it was going over things like, okay, what are the different types of RAM? What exactly is a CPU? How does that function? Things like that. But it's not like,
yeah.
hey, when was the first Intel CPU developed? Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Like, when teachers have like their own way of teaching
Mhm.
rather than doing what they were like told to do, like by the curriculum and so on. I find a lot of teachers are just stuck to the curriculum
Mhm.
and don't really have the big picture of the field themselves.
Mhm.
And it's much more enjoyable to learn when the teacher themselves has like this drive to teach because they like the field rather than because it's their job and that's just how they have to do it.
Yeah. I've I definitely noticed a lot of the older teachers were definitely much better at teaching because they had. I think the best teacher I had for maths was this guy in like his I think 60s or 70s, and he just it was like obviously because he still had to teach the curriculum, but he would also show us like practical examples of how the formulas we were learning could actually be used, and I think that
Yeah,
that especially when you're younger definitely helps. I guess show you why something actually makes sense to learn rather than just like, okay, today we're going to learn how this part of linear algebra works where you don't really have any I guess any point to ground it on. And I think the same is
yeah,
definitely true for like kanji as well. Like if you just learn individual kanji by itself, I think it's very difficult to see why that's useful, but if you're learning kanji and then also learning some vocabulary that's actually using it, I think it makes it much more entertaining to learn and makes it, I guess, stick more as well.
yeah. It's like actually, like before, I said that I only use the Core 2K 6K deck, but I actually use RTK as well to learn kanji.
Hmm.
I'm not very serious about it, but sometimes like I'm most of the kanji I already like have encountered, but
Hmm.
sometimes I get like a kanji which I've never seen before in any words, and then it's like is this even a real like is this kanji even used anywhere? Like it's like way cooler to like learn like have knowledge where that kanji is used rather
Hmm.
than just having it on its own. And yeah, the same thing about like the math. Like I remember, like I said before, I always ask the teachers like, why is this useful? Like
Hmm.
where, like how are we going to use this? Like when I asked that in high school, it was a completely different experience. Like the teacher actually like answered the question instead of getting like triggered. So when I asked about, let's say, linear algebra, like matrices and stuff,
Hmm.
uh, then she actually like knew how to answer that. Like those are used in computing in like um, I don't remember exactly what she said, but something to do with scripting and
Hmm.
so on. uh, and that's like way more motivating to actually like if there's like any answer at all to as to why something you're learning can be useful, there is instantly way more motivation than if it's just like, oh, you need it in a test and
Yeah,
that's it.
that's always the best answer. Like,
Yeah, like most of the time when I asked that question in like the previous school was like, um, oh, you need that to get into, like you need that for the final exam, and if you don't learn this you can't get into high school.
mhm.
Like
Like, okay, well, sure, I got that much. You didn't tell me that. I sort of understood that, but can you like tell me
yeah,
why? Give me a bit more context here. Yeah, that's sort of what
yeah,
separates a good and a bad teacher. Someone who's just doing it because it's a job, and someone who actually genuinely enjoys the thing they're trying to teach.
yeah, absolutely. It's like kind of goes to show if like the teacher themselves like has an actual like proper education in the field.
Hmm.
Like do they see the big picture? Do they have the experience with it and so on?
Yeah, I've definitely run into some a big problem I found with teachers at university. You had some because I came from I was doing programming. You had some who had actually worked in industry, and then you had other people who they went to university to become a professor, basically. And I
Oh
found
yeah,
like those people were the ones who really didn't have a proper way to actually show why something's actually going to be useful. But I guess that just comes from the fact they don't really have that much experience actually working with it themselves. So they're still only just a little bit further ahead than the students they're actually teaching.
Yeah, it's like often like teachers have, especially teachers who teach like many different subjects and classes.
Hmm.
Um, they have pretty much exactly the amount of knowledge you need to pass the class
Hmm.
and nothing beyond that. But yeah, in my school as well, when I like in programming classes and things like that, there were a lot of teachers, like most of the teachers were clearly hadn't worked in the field or hadn't worked in the field for like, I don't know, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were like always teaching like really obsolete stuff like action script, like Flash.
Oh, okay. Actually, I want.
Inst-
What did you learn in your programming classes? Because I thought mine were bad, but if that's what you learned, then I feel like it was even worse
yeah,
for
well,
you.
yeah, I had like a lot of classes. One of them was like web
Mhm.
development, and they were basically like at first it was like JavaScript and like JavaScript and HTML, but it's like the way the first few classes were basically like the teacher put a screenshot like with a projector put a screenshot of code onto
Uh-huh.
the wall basically, and then our task was to basically type the code into our computers, and it was like 100 lines of HTML, like, and CSS and stuff like that, and you had to write all that manually, and there was like no explanations, nothing. And the point of the exercise was basically that the teacher said that, okay, this will basically teach you how to type, and that's pretty much it. Like, and all the other lessons with the same teacher were basically like, okay, here is some JavaScript like task, like an exercise from 1995, so go do those and try to figure it out yourself. I'm not going to help you if you get stuck, because otherwise you won't learn how to problem solve yourself. And
Also
like,
known
so
as I don't
basically,
actually know how to help you.
yeah, basically the teacher didn't do anything at all. He just gave like tasks, and
Wow.
um and like he clearly hadn't either worked in the industry or like um for a really long time. Like he said, this was in like 2015, where he
Mm.
said like in professional environments, nobody uses a script like for HTML. Nobody uses like text editors. Everybody uses like Adobe Dreamweaver or something,
Oh.
which was like I don't even know if people use that anymore.
No one uses. I don't know of a single person that uses Dreamweaver. I don't know if it's even still being updated.
Yeah, yeah, and the same teacher was the one who basically had those action script classes like Adobe Flash. We had like 2 weeks of full time, like basically the entire week was like 8 hours of action script, and that was for 2 weeks. That was like a practical period, and basically I asked the teacher, why are we learning like Flash, like action script, because this is like don't they say that Flash is going to die soon or something? And then the teacher was like instantly a bit triggered, because basically what he said that was like Flash will never die, and the fact that people say that Flash will die is just like some wet dream of nerds, and it will never die. And then now in like 2021, it's pretty much dead.
Well,
And
yeah,
that was
I
like in
just looked up Flash
2016.
dead, and the first article that came up is Adobe Flash is dead. Here's what that means.
Yeah, it's like it's so clear that it's like either he's not up to date with the field or doesn't really have proper experience in it
Mhm.
himself. So it's like after the school for like 3 years of like web development and stuff like that, The only people who actually knew how to code after that were the people who learned on their own.
Yeah.
The people who just learned what were in the class contents, they still had like no clue what was going on,
Mhm.
basically. So it was like, I don't know, kind of a joke.
Wow, I thought okay, no, that's way worse. I was at least like learning how to program, but we were using kind of older technologies. So most of what we were doing for the
Yeah.
web dev class was things like a couple of versions old of ASP.NET and the older version of
Uh,
Angular, which nobody uses anymore. But that's
oh,
way worse.
yeah, Angular JS.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that reminds me. Like, I actually wanted to say that there was like one teacher who came later,
Mm,
who was like actually somebody that had a job. Like, actually, he had like a lot of very often classes were canceled because he had to do something in his job.
mhm,
So this was like a side job for him, like the teaching, and that was like a completely different experience because that was like it was like beginning like intro to web development. I
mhm.
mean, web design. So it was like at the time it was really modern to use Bootstrap. So he like actually showed, okay, we're going to use Bootstrap, and here's how you do it, and so on. Instead of
Write
like
every line of CSS yourself.
yeah, and basically the teacher who we had before that was there was no good practices or anything. There was no mindset. It was just like make a circle in make a SVG circle in HTML and then make an SVG house in
Oh god.
HTML. Like you had to draw a house with SVG in HTML. Like that's like I don't know.
Oh my god.
Doesn't teach you the mindset or like good practices or like it doesn't get you prepared to be a software developer. It just shows you the syntax basically.
Well, it's not even a sensible idea because if you want to draw a house in SVG, there are graphics applications you can draw a house in and then just copy over the HTML.
Yeah, and like it doesn't even explain what an SVG is or like where it's actually
Mhm.
used in. It's just like okay, just draw a house in SVG. That's how you like uh draw stuff in HTML. Okay.
The other problem I had was teachers who are very set on doing things their one way. That does make sense
Yeah.
for like certain things, but when it comes to programming, there's generally like 3 or 4 different answers for any given problem.
Yeah.
And I had one lecture. It was for my my big data class. We were doing some Python scripting for data analysis, and the entire class realized that the solution that he was giving made absolutely no sense. And we actually got to the point where we actually went to like his superior because he ended up, I think, failing the entire class because
Oh.
oh, actually, no, it was failing. So this class, no, it was half the class. Sorry. So the class was made up of data scientists and programmers. All of the programmers realized that the solution that he was offering made no sense and would be really, really slow, and all of them were failed. But in reality, he just didn't care about like how fast the code ran because his answer was, oh, if you're doing big data stuff, ultimately the speed doesn't matter because the company you're working for is accepting that it's going to take 2 weeks to run the code. But the difference was like it was a one line change that made it so much faster, and he just didn't want to accept it. Luckily, we ended up kind of forcing him to accept it, but
Yeah.
yeah, you run into
It's
people
like
like that for sure.
yeah, it's definitely pretty common. It's like I don't know. It's I suppose a lot of like teachers get into some position without being like properly educated in the field themselves, and since like very often nobody really knows like getting into like programming is one of those fields which is very different from other uh, fields that you learn in school, in the sense that the real reality of programming, like working in a company, is so different from like the theory, and working in like computer science, learning computer science in
Mhm.
school is like a completely different thing, like real life experience versus school. And like what I find is that a lot of very often the way teachers in college teach programming is basically through like mathematics. Like
Mhm.
you have to do like a math exercise to pass your uh, programming class,
Yep.
essentially, instead of like teaching you how to actually program and what's important in programming, like in terms of like good practices and whatever. It's basically just usually teaching you syntax.
Mhm. I think the best classes I had were the ones that the lectures they were sort of going over a lot of the syntax stuff, but then the assignments they ended up offering were very much like something actually practical. Like one of my classes, I think it was my iOS development class. We had to make a travel app that would basically show you a bunch of tourist attractions, and while he provided the data to us and told us like how it was structured, we were sort of given free reign on how to actually structure the app, but we were also being graded on things like how like the app was designed. So it sort of encouraged the students to go and actually look at how similar apps were made and what actually made sense for like UI design choices in that case.
Yeah, yeah, learning by example is like like in terms of real life projects is a great way to learn. And I feel uh like having students do their own projects is also like a great way to learn, because I feel like I learned programming mostly through just doing random experimentations and random projects on my own.
Hmm.
And and also, you said that it was like uh, you had to use a map for like tourist destinations.
Hmm.
For some reason, I feel like schools always make some kind of exercise where you have to use a map, like Google Maps API or something. I know like one person who had it in college. I had it in like in my school, and you had it.
Hmm.
Like it seems like a very common exercise.
I don't know, maybe because just it's something relatively easy to work with. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, it's probably like kind of like common, I suppose, as well, kind of
Mhm.
useful. Like often, like in terms of web development, like web design, you very often have like those landing pages for businesses, and the business ones like their I suppose their office on the map or something
Mhm.
embedded into the website.
Yeah, it's definitely true. We can, if we let's go back to one of the earlier things for a bit. With the way that classes are structured, one thing we didn't really touch on is the problem with a lot of classes is they're sort of geared towards the slower people in the class. They're not really there to like if you're someone who likes to work ahead of the class, you're always going to feel like you're not really getting that much out of it, especially if you're in the case of programming, like if you're doing your own projects on the side, you're always going to be like way ahead of what you're actually learning. And I imagine the same would be true for language classes as well, where if you are doing a lot of your own immersion stuff and sort of learning the language outside of the class, you're going to end up being just way ahead of everybody else, especially way ahead of the course content itself.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like that's also what I brought up in like my Russian video, is that basically the classes move at the pace of either the slowest or fastest
Hmm.
student, or at the pace that the teacher decides. So it's like it's like really weird. It's like it's not really personalized.
Hmm.
Like that's the issue. And I kind of feel like in general language classes should be a supplement rather than like I feel like it's a good idea, just because the way language classes work is that they often focus so much on grammar and
Hmm.
like rote learning words and stuff like that, and exercises, output exercises, that I feel like it's a good idea to learn on your own so that the language class will be more beneficial. Because if you move at the pace of the class, I feel like you move too fast grammatically, but you don't build up the intuition for the language.
Hmm.
But if you study the language on your own, you already have motivation to learn the language. You are building an intuition for the language. You have a better vocabulary. So perhaps the output exercises in the class are more beneficial. And I suppose you can ask the teacher like questions you might have encountered yourself. And
Hmm.
I suppose that way language classes can be pretty useful. But doing using only language classes to learn without doing any
Hmm.
supplemental studying on your own, I feel like that's just not going to work.
I think this is why I see more people recommend getting a tutor rather than doing Japanese classes, because with a tutor
Yeah.
you can sort of, like, obviously you're not going to learn everything from the tutor, but you're going to, when you have those lessons, you can sort of like get the tutor up to speed like where you're at right now and sort of work from there rather than having to work around what other people are learning around you.
Yeah, it's like direct one-on-one time and stuff like that.
Hmm. Yep, definitely true.
Like, yeah. And I feel like a big issue that we had also, and I feel like this is really common with language classes, especially um in like as an extra class in school rather than a direct language class, is like holiday breaks and vacations. Like,
Mm.
they are great, but at the same
Mhm.
time, like, I always waited for the vacations because that means I don't need to learn Russian anymore. And but that what that means is basically that I don't need to learn Russian anymore, so I don't learn Russian for 3 months during the summer, and then I have forgotten pretty much everything that I learned. So I'll have to learn it again when the next year starts. So I feel like it's much more beneficial to learn a language continuously, every day or at least every week, so you don't forget the words you had learned, you don't get rusty and so on. But
Mhm.
if you suddenly have like a 3 month break every year, it's like, I feel like that's actually one of the biggest issues with language classes, at least in the way we had them in school. If you don't do any learning on your own,
Mhm.
it's just an incomplete um, way of learning a language. And it just yeah, that's the issue. Like, it's incomplete, but it could be way more beneficial if it was like a bit more optimized.
Mhm. I see people making very like similar complaints like on the OneEconomy forums. They'll say, "Oh, I had some like commitments I had to get to for a couple of months." Then they'll realize they've forgotten like a lot of the recent stuff they've learned. While they might still remember a lot of the early stuff, because the early stuff you've sort of gone through the SRS system far more often, but a lot of like the recent levels they've gone through, they've completely forgotten and they end up just resetting. And the problem with resetting is then you start redoing the content that you already know, and you're going to get yourself into that cycle where you're not really learning anything that's really interesting you, because it's just the same stuff you've already learned. So it's a hard thing to get back into if you've decided to take a break for some reason. So the hard like
Yeah.
if you can keep it up, that's when you're going to make like actual progress. But once you decide to take that break, or for whatever reason you have to take a break, that's when there's going to be some serious issues getting back into it.
Yeah, I actually made a point on this as well in I made a video which talks about 10 tips I have for like motivation when it comes to language learning. And that was one of those, like, be very careful of taking breaks,
Hmm.
because very often when you take a break, you forget a lot of what you had recently learned. So you feel like when you get back, you have to do the same stuff over again, and it
Hmm.
feels like you've lost so much time into the break, and like getting back into it is so hard again. And like when the ball is rolling, when you have when you haven't skipped a single day and everything is going great, then it's like it's constant progress. But when you have suddenly taken a month break, you feel like you have to like, first of all, getting back into learning is like hard,
Mhm.
because the same way with exercise, let's say you um, go to the gym for a year and then suddenly don't go for 2 months. It's way easier to not go to the gym than it is to go to the gym. So you
I
have
know
to
that
like,
feeling. Definitely
yeah,
know that
you
feeling.
have to like, yeah, you have to restart the habit of
Mhm.
learning or going to the gym. So it's like it takes a lot of effort just to get the ball rolling again. And then on top of that, it's like you have to learn the same stuff you learned again.
Mhm. I did have another topic and I forgot it as you were talking. Um,
Oh,
but we are hitting just on 2 hours now, so I guess we can wrap it up here because I'm getting
yeah.
really tired. I woke up this morning with like a pounding headache and decided to take a nap. I'm still
Oh,
tired, so
oh, rip.
but I will go to bed early tonight and hopefully not be tired tomorrow. But I'm still gonna be tired. I'm always tired. The
Yeah, I
problem of
know that feel
working
as well.
night shifts,
Oh, okay.
but
I guess, yeah. I guess the issue with like that kind of stuff is like um, melatonin production. Like basically, sunlight is actually really important for getting enough energy through the day. Like
mm,
um, if I in the morning, if I have like my curtains down and light gets into my room, it's so much easier to wake up than during winter where it's like constantly dark here.
mm,
And like it's I have to wake up when it's like pitch black in my room, and it's like I feel so much more tired every time. And
mm,
it's like the same when you're awake as well and your room is completely dark, you're much more tired than it is um, when it's like bright,
mm.
even though you might have better sleep. So I feel like working night shifts probably has like a similar effect, most
Yeah,
likely.
yeah, that seems to be the case. So I usually try to take like an hour before I go to sleep and like you know have a lamp on and just read for a while,
Yeah,
which would be nice. But when I get to the point where I can actually use that time and read something in Japanese, that'd be nice.
yeah. I'm actually waiting for that too. Like once I get past the uh, main Anki deck I have, like I could start immersing right now intensively as well. But I don't know. I kind of feel like I want to finish the deck as even
Yeah.
as it's like a milestone,
Hmm.
and then I'm mentally prepared to start immersing like a lot and reading a lot and stuff like that, getting into the fun stuff.
Hmm. I might have a look into that deck and just see how it goes. It'd be
Yeah, it's like,
nice to try out alongside one Ikani. See which I prefer.
yeah, it's I recommend trying it. It's not, I suppose, I said in a video that it's a must have for me, but I suppose it doesn't, like, not everyone likes it,
Mhm.
it seems. Um, they don't like how it's structured. They prefer to have sentences, for example, for context, because the text doesn't have context. Like when you see a word, often you have duplicates of the same word, but they're not really duplicates. It's just like the same kanji used for two different words and stuff
Right.
like that. So yeah, it's like you have to deal with those things, but I don't mind them so much.
Hmm.
It's a bit frustrating at times, but at the same time, what isn't frustrating when it comes to doing something as hard as learning Japanese? So
Hmm. Well, I think that's.
oh yeah, one more thing
Oh
about it
yes.
is that I'm doing the 6K version, but there's a 2K version as well. Well,
Yeah.
6K is basically just 2K plus 4K, so 2K 6K. Um, a lot of people do the 2000 words first, like the 2K, and then start immersing. And I assume that's a valid strategy as well.
Hmm.
Like just get the core 2000 words and then start like focusing on immersion and mining words and sentences from immersion. And I think that can be a very practical way of doing it as well.
Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you need 6,000 words to be able to start actually immersing. That's how English works. Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you definitely don't. And like the deck has some words which are like genuinely words which you might not use like in everyday life, like some business words and like
okay.
politics and stuff like that. But I don't mind them. I feel like everything I learned has some like benefit at least.
Like, here is the kanji for communism. Like, all
Yeah,
right,
actually there
sure.
is communism. Communism is like Kyosan Shugi or something like that.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't think you're gonna use that one in like everyday conversation.
Yeah, I suppose unless you like want to talk about politics in Japanese.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I don't want to do that. I just
Yeah.
wanna, I just wanna listen to, I don't know, cute girls doing cute things.
Yeah, probably a more wholesome experience than
For sure.
discussing
Or JoJo.
communism
JoJo
with
also
boobs.
works.
Yeah.
I, yeah. If we don't end it off now, we're not going to end it off at any point. Usually, what
Yeah.
I do at the end of the podcast is give a just a random channel a shout out, and I don't know how we didn't mention him throughout the entire 2 hours, but I'm just gonna say anyone who hasn't watched this channel before, go watch Matt versus Japan.
Yeah.
I don't know how
I
in
I
2 hours
actually
his name
include
didn't come up once. That's actually
yeah.
impressive.
I actually include like a lot of his videos in my own videos as a reference, like because it's like I don't mind giving like I feel like giving shout outs to people is a good thing in the sense that if they have put effort into their content and it's good content, then it like deserves to be watched. And at the same time, it's like I don't I feel like it's nice that I don't have to explain the same thing he already has explained in very great detail. So I
Mhm,
can just reference the video. So if you're more interested in like learning more about that specific thing, you can just watch that video.
mhm.
So it's like really nice that he has made those videos because I can always refer to them myself as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you have a another channel you might recommend?
Um,
If you don't, I do have a couple others I can think of.
I wish I did. Like, I actually kind of don't right now. Maybe like Dogen,
I,
perhaps.
I
I
just searched up Dogen.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, that works. I love his channel.
yeah. It's he has like educational and comedy content for Japanese as well. Like educational, as in like he has pitch accent stuff, which is a very important topic for
Hmm.
Japanese as well. It's probably good to get started with it early as well. And I guess in general has a lot of comedy content and advanced Japanese lessons
Hmm.
in advanced as in culturally advanced.
Well, even if you're not really interested in learning Japanese, he has a lot of really entertaining videos. Just watching comedy stuff
Yeah,
is fun enough.
yeah,
Because I've
pretty
been
much.
watching his stuff way before I even thought about learning Japanese.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Where can people find you?
Oh, well, I guess on YouTube. I have a Twitter account as well, but I'm actually not that active on Twitter.
That's good. You shouldn't be. It's a waste of time.
Yeah. So I think my YouTube channel is just it's the name is Livakivi, like Livakivi, Livaki. I
Make sure
guess
you
that's
spell
some.
it correctly. I've noticed it's really difficult to find your account. Like if you have one letter wrong, it just doesn't show
Oh,
up.
oh, damn.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
Yeah. I
problem.
like. I have. Okay, this is the last thing I suppose before we end.
It's fine. If we
Uh,
keep going on, it's all good.
yeah. Okay, it's basically I have a lot of trouble like picking screen names
Mhm,
for various places. I can't force myself to think of a good name. It
mhm.
has to come naturally and it has to stick naturally.
Yeah.
So like I can kind of say that I kind of forced that name on my YouTube channel, and I'm still not sure if if I like it or not. But at least like But at least if you search it on Google or on YouTube, there are like basically no other results except my channel.
Mhm.
So at least it's good for search engines, I suppose. Unless you misspell it, then
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Well, I think the misspelling thing's partially just because the channel's so small and there's not that much
Yeah,
content on it,
probably.
but over time that should
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. I hope so too.
But
Well, it
my
was
name's I'm just as bad with it. Like that's the reason why my channel is just Brody Robertson, because I'm horrible at naming things. Like, you know what? I'll just use my name, whatever.
yeah, that's pretty legit, I suppose.
And there's not that many Brody Robertsons that make content. There is an 8-year-old Fortnite YouTuber. He has like
Oh,
10 subs. There's a golf player, and there's like some random woman, but I am the top result.
well, that's nice, I suppose.
I
I
wasn't at the
suppose,
start.
hopefully,
It was a mess at the
yeah,
start. I had the problem where like, oh, there's all of these other Brody Robertsons that came before me, but none of them really made
yeah,
videos. It was just channels that existed.
yeah. I guess you overtook the Fortnite player now,
Mm.
and well, okay, it was so we could finally end it. So
You can. I've
it
just
was
been.
a really nice
Uh,
talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I haven't really done any podcasts before, so maybe I hopefully it's still fun to listen to for somebody who's listening.
Hopefully.
And
Well, uh, one of the how many subs are there on Odyssey? Uh, on YouTube there's like 400 subs on the channel. On Odyssey there's I think like 14,000, something like that. So one of the
oh
14,000 people will enjoy it. Maybe. I don't know.
oh yeah, that would be. I hope so. Like even if there's like one person who finds it entertaining, it's always still nice. Like
I do a lot of
my
variety
own
content
videos.
on the
Yeah,
podcast, so I think the people who watch it sort of expect there to be different sort of people who come on.
yeah, yeah, and perhaps like there's so much stuff to talk about. Like the interesting thing is with language learning is that it's surprisingly there's so much stuff to talk about. So
Hmm.
I suppose if we couldn't talk about everything today, maybe some next time in the future as well.
For sure, yeah. If you want to come back on at any point, I'm more than happy to have you back on.
Yeah, sure. All right.
Cool. So before we go, I will read out my patrons. A
All
special
right.
thank you to Chris, Joachim, Donald, Michael, Andrew, Nathan, David, Nonsa, Will, Brennan, Chico Bento, Jamie, Joseph, Mitchell, PDD, Stephen, Tony, Tushar, and all of the $2 supporters. If you'd like to support my work, there'll be links in the description to all of that. The video version of this podcast is on YouTube and Odyssey if you're watching the audio version. For the video listeners, the video watchers, the audio version you'll find literally anywhere on any podcast platform. Just look up Tech Over Tea and it will probably be there. And as for Livakivi's links, they will be in the description. Also, go join his Discord. It's very, very quiet right now, and
Yeah, it's a
maybe it'll be
really
more
small
fun
Discord.
as more people join.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, all right.
Any last words?
Um, no, I suppose it was really fun and hopefully fun for everyone else as well.
Cool. Thank you guys for watching.